Well, hello. My name is Michael Higgins, and I am doing the presentation for International Studies of Southeast Asia. First and foremost, you have to forgive me for my scruffy appearance and voice. I've been sick for a while. For my paper, I chose to talk about Annam, or Northern Vietnam. That's the subject I submitted on week 5. And as I dug more into the subject, however, I noticed that Northern Vietnam is Vietnam. And I'll get more into that later. But first, I have visual aid. So I have a globe, and here, it's probably going to be backwards on this one, but here you can see, this is the area I'm talking about. Northern Vietnam, right by China. You've got Cambodia, Laos, etc. So Northern Vietnam was, believe it or not, actually part of China for about 1,000 years. It was a province from early BCs. So what happened is the Qin dynasty united China, and then its successor, because it only lasted for a very short period, I believe about 15 years, its successor, the Han, they saw the Vietnamese and thought they would be a good addition to the empire. So they actually, one of their earliest actions was to take over northern Vietnam. And this was critical for a number of reasons, because at the time, the Vietnamese, or Viets, only lived around the Red River Valley, right by where Hanoi is on this. You can't really see, but right by where Hanoi is. So this is all very mountainous, and you do have the Red River and the Red River Valley, which is where Hanoi is again. But all the rest of this area here, this was controlled by Champa, which was a completely different nation, and populated by a completely different people, the Chams. They still exist, by the way, the Chams. They have been completely run out of their lands by the Vietnamese, and they exist as a minority population, but they do still exist. So the Chams largely interacted with the Khmer Empire, the Angkor Empire out of Cambodia. And they also fought against the Vietnamese and were kind of squeezed from both sides. But as Cambodia's power fell, the Angkor Empire's power declined, the Chams were able to increase in influence. Of course, this whole time, there was this process ongoing called Indianization. And I'll talk more about this in the paper, but basically what that means is Indian culture was spreading throughout the whole subcontinent. You've probably run across it in Osborne, which is one of my primary sources. I actually have like 6 or 7 sources on this one, so I'm not going to list them all off, but I've got books and articles and everything. So Indianization was not the wholesale adoption of Indian culture. You don't see the caste system spreading anywhere else, for example. It was a lot of their religion, their cultural memes, all kinds of important things to that culture was spread through traders and missionaries. And because it was very similar in many ways to existing Southeast Asian cultures, it was adopted rather easily. So that meant that all of this, except for northern Vietnam, was Indianized and came to share much in common. But northern Vietnam, because it was under control of China, was Sinicized, Chineseized, basically. When they eventually managed to break free, they expelled the Chinese. They went on to use the superior technology that they had adopted from China, because China, up until about 14 or 1500, was the leading world power, unchallenged. Which is why many Chinese today see that their return to greatness is kind of, inevitable. They were able to use that to push the Champa out of Champa. They eventually succeeded in conquering all of Vietnam, but despite that, there were still significant cultural differences, and they ended up becoming separate states, and there's a whole big thing, different ruling families, and then that basically existed all the way through to the 1800s, late 1700s, early 1800s, when the French came and colonized all of Vietnam technically, but they concentrated all their efforts in Saigon, which is now Ho Chi Minh City, creating another division, the colonized South with many French influences and the existing North. That caused all kinds of conflicts. You also had all kinds of issues with the different crops that are grown, the different cultures between the South. Many of my sources go out of their way to point out that they are a united culture. They do speak all the same language, Vietnamese. However, I think it's important to note that they analogize it as like the people in the South would be speaking English, like us, and the people in the North would be speaking English like Scottish people. Scottish and American are very different cultures, even though we do have a lot in the same in common. So I think it's understandable why there's some division there. And since then, they've had a lot of different issues as well, even after gaining independence. Because obviously, the American forces concentrated in the South, and the communist forces in the North. So there's another conflict. Then after it had united, it was the North that China invaded. China actually invaded in the Ming Dynasty, the Yuan Dynasty, the Song Dynasty, and the People's Republic in 1979, I believe. So they're constantly invading Vietnam. They see it as a lost province in many ways. Not so much anymore, but so they are dealing with much more contact from invaders in the South, believe it or not. So they have ongoing issues with that, as we read about from the Ghosts in Vietnam article. It's going to be a long paper. I'm going to try and cut it down to 8 to 9 pages, hopefully. It's a lot to cover, but it's really an interesting subject. I really did not know much of this information before I started doing it. So I hope you can get some information out of this, and I hope I'm not botching it up too badly. Looking forward to submitting it. Talk to you later. It's been a good class.